Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whatever the time is, where you are in any part of the world. Welcome to the School of Wisdom, the March 2023 edition. It's my absolute delight and pleasure to welcome you to this month's edition of the School of Wisdom. My name is Peter Olayola. Now, if you're new to the School of Wisdom is designed to teach the practicalities of life as this relate to the simplicity of the Word of God. In other words, it is about knowing the mind of God, how God expects us to live by taking instruction or direction from His Word, seeing the relevance of the Bible, of the Word of God in our day to day life, knowing that scriptures are meant to make us wise. So, and of course, when we are wise, we live effectively. And the running text is First Timothy chapter number 4, verse 8, which says, Godliness is profitable unto all things. So you're welcome to the March 2023 edition. Let's say a short word of prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for your help that we've always enjoyed. We thank you for this session today. We ask that you teach us by yourself and empower us to walk in the light of the same word in Jesus' name. Amen. So, what are we talking about this evening and this month of March 2023? Like I said the last time, I want to continue our discussion on the power of knowledge. So, I'm talking about the power of knowledge part 2, the power of knowledge part 2. And in case you missed the February 2023 edition, I will encourage you to go on this channel and watch it again. Or even if you didn't miss it, you just want to refresh yourself in order to or understand the foundation upon which we want to build in this month of March. So we're looking at the power of knowledge part 2. And last month, I did mention the fact that when we're talking about knowledge in this context, we're talking about knowledge in at least three dimensions or three broad areas of life, if you like to call it. We say we're talking about the knowledge of God, we're talking about the knowledge of the world around us, the system in which we find ourselves, as well as the knowledge of our field of endeavor. And last month, I did mention, or I did explain, at least in part, what the knowledge of God entails and what this means for us and how this can be advantageous to us in life. So I want to continue from there. I do not want to go in depth into some of the things that we already covered last month. And that's why, again, I'll implore you, if you missed out or you want to understand the basis from which we want to build what we're talking about this month, please go back and listen to it again. And of course, share it with your loved ones, and I'm sure it will bless you tremendously. So we're talking about the power of knowledge part 2. And I want to start this evening, this month, by talking about the second broad area of knowledge, as I mentioned to us last month, and that is the knowledge of the world around us, the knowledge of the system in which we find ourselves. And I started by actually asking some questions or posing some questions last month that what do you know about the world in which you live in? What do you know about the society in which you find yourself? That have you mastered the keys, the principles it takes to succeed in your location or in life, broadly speaking? And when we're talking about the knowledge of the world around us, broadly speaking, what are the things that we're talking about? What are the things that we have in mind? Now, there are several aspects of that. The first one is the knowledge of the culture or the way of life of the people in which you live or in which you find yourself, the people you interact with, the area where you find yourself, the knowledge of the culture, the way of life of people. Somebody say, culture, what is my business with the culture of the people? Now, to a very large extent, you cannot excel in a system if your life is contrary to the culture, the way of life of the people around you. So an American preacher went somewhere in Asia to preach and to conduct healing meetings, and the person was laying hands on the people, but to his surprise, people were not getting healed, people were not getting their miracles, and he was perplexed until one of the men around him, I think his interpreter or something like that, told him that it's not that you're not powerful, it's not that you're not anointed, it's not that the testimonies you see in your meetings in America cannot happen here in Asia. However, you do need to understand that the people here find it offensive when you lay hands on them, particularly without permission. So you need to actually be able to explain to them why you are laying hands on them, why it is important. So it was a case of the preacher actually taking some extra minute to explain to the people that, oh, I lay hands on you in line with what the Bible teaches and in line with what I believe. And that when I lay hands on you, healing virtue will flow. It's not a sign of disrespect by any means. And just that adjustment was significant. As long as the preacher made the adjustment, people started receiving their miracles and all sorts of things started happening just because he understood the culture of the people, the culture of the environment in which he found himself at the time. Now, it's the same way with different aspects of life. For example, how do they relate with elderly people in a particular culture where you find yourself, or younger people? How do they relate with children or even animals? Right? You'll be surprised. For some people, maybe you get to the Western world and you discover that maybe you are on the bus. You're supposed to give preference to elderly people. If you don't do that, how is that likely to affect you? It may be seen as a sign of disrespect, dishonor, and of course, there may be even bigger consequences beyond what we are willing to talk about. How do people treat their children? How do people treat even animals? Right? So that you are a child of God or that you are a believer does not mean you should lose your sense. That you are a child of God does not mean you should lose respect for the culture of the people, the way of life of the people. We're not talking about anything that contradicts God's expectations for our life. We're just talking about understanding the people that you live around, the system that you find yourself in. So, for example, that somebody ate cats or animals does not mean if you see a cat, you should injure one or you should kill one. You may be prosecuted for that in some societies. Don't say because of your own understanding or your religious explanations for why cats exist, for example, is universal, is the same for everybody else. So you take your religious ideas, your understanding of what cats are to you, and use that as the basis for relating with somebody else. The same thing with children. The way of bringing up children in one culture differs from one culture to another culture. Don't use your religious ideas or your cultural background to be the basis for acting in another system, or be the basis for judging people about what they are doing. Now, so it is important that we understand that. Like I remember somebody the other time saw a cat. He said, if not for something, I would have killed the cat. I said, if you kill the cat in a system where cats are actually considered as precious possession, you may find yourself in trouble just because you don't like cats, right? So that is very, very important. So the fact that you are saved and maybe your parents or your siblings are not saved does not mean you should disrespect them. Even in the Bible, Paul talked about being like the Gentiles or being like the Jews when he was with either of them, that he may be able to save some, right? So the fact that you are saved or that you are anointed or talented does not mean you should be stupid. Honestly, it's not to insult anybody. The fact that you are saved, the fact that you are anointed, the fact that you are talented does not mean you should be stupid. It does not mean you should treat people anyhow. It does not mean you should have disregard for any system in which you find yourself. So this is not just about maybe traveling out of one country, going to another country, but even changing neighborhoods, even changing cities, moving from one part of a city to another, crossing ethnic boundaries, understanding what people do and why they do what they do. So it is not oftentimes that many of us can live in a multicultural system just because we do not respect the culture, the way of life of people around us, right? Now, that is one aspect of it, the world in which you live, the world in which you find yourself. It's the same thing. Maybe you find yourself in a different economic system or a particular economic system different from what you're used to, about finance, about investment. What do you know, for example, about savings, about building wealth, about making money beyond just going to your regular job, beyond maybe your 9 to 5 or whatever time you work your job? What do you know about people? So, for example, many of us will see that maybe some of our parents, our older generations, it's not as if they never made money in their life. But some of them, they made money and it looks as if at a particular time, the money stopped flowing and everything started going down. What do you know that can help you to guard against such in life? About making money, about managing money, about multiplying money. What do you know about such, right? Knowledge of finance. So, for example, if you do not understand how to manage your finances, right, you may not be able to guard against certain things that come to life, or certain events, certain complexities that happen in life, right? Do you know how to balance liberality, for example, with sensibility? Do you know how to go by scriptural injunctions that say to give to the poor, while also ensuring that you have savings? Do you know what it means for you to give to the Lord while also you have financial sense, financial discipline? That is that about finances. Then it can be knowledge about your own health, the knowledge about the functioning of the human body, right? So recently I listened to somebody, a very powerful preacher, and he was saying essentially he just found himself struggling health wise, and he went to see a doctor. I think he was having back pain or something like that. And after examining him for so much, the doctor started asking him some questions about his personal health and all sorts of things like that. And the doctor told him that, you see, the way you were going before, if you had not come to me, you have just a short period of time to live, that you were going to kill yourself. And the man was surprised that, he had always believed and confessed and prayed that he will live long. And the doctor said, no, regardless of what you have been confessing, because of the way you have neglected your body, the way you have been careless about how you have taken care of your body till now, it would have been impossible, right? It would have been difficult for you to live long, right? So that is the knowledge about human body. What do you know about health, about nutrition, about exercise? All of these things relate to the knowledge of the world around you, the knowledge of life, broadly speaking, right? Now, it's the same thing about the government or the policies of government that affect what you do. What do you know about different governmental policies, about different legislation, and how this may affect you? Right? Don't say, I'm just spiritual, I do not want to have anything to do with government or politics. Fine, you may not participate in that, but there are policies that government will make that will affect you. So you may be binding witches, for example, if government is talking about deregulation, about maybe privatization, and how these policies may affect you. If you're a government worker, for example, instead of binding witches and all of those things, you do need to actually know the workings of the economy and how this may relate to you as individuals. What do you know about taxes, about insurance, about legal implications of doing business, of doing some businesses, and all sorts of things like that, right? Churches may lose money just because they are careless about these things, and it's not as if God is not with them, or because they are not spiritual, or whatever explanation you want to give. So it is important that we understand these different dimensions of knowledge, of life, of the system of the world, and how these affect us. Also about people. What do you know about people? What do you know about human nature? Now, the Bible speaking about Jesus, the Bible says Jesus knew all men and he did not commit himself to them. Jesus knew all men and he did not commit himself to them. So that means some of us, for example, we don't know people, so we commit ourselves to them and we end up with heartaches, with regret. Right? A very successful man, during his 70th birthday, they asked him, what lessons do you have, or what lessons would you say life has taught you? The man said, life has taught me to love everybody but trust only a few. He said, but if you disagree, if you don't agree with what I've said, wait till you are 70 and then come back to have this discussion with me. In other words, what do you know about people? What do you know about human nature, about the nature of praises, for example, compared to the nature of criticisms? How well can you relate with these things? Do you actually take them personal and you wonder why some things happen to you when you maybe respect some people so much and things like that? These are part and parcel of the world, of the system in which you exist, of the sphere, right, that you exist, that you find yourself. What do you know about human relationships? What do you know the skills that it takes to manage people, right? So I say, for example, if you meet great or successful people and they don't want to meet you again, it is your fault. If you ever meet a successful person, if you ever meet a great person, you have audience with them, and they don't want to meet you again, they maybe privately or directly or indirectly, they say they do not want to meet you ever again in their life, it is your fault. It is because you do not know what it takes to manage such relationship. You do not have the skills, right? The understanding, the know-how that such relationship entail. So there are several aspects of that. What do you know about making money regardless of the jobs that you do? What do you know about maybe investing in people, about sowing into their future? What do you know about parenting? Right? It's not just about maybe you want to enforce certain authority. Can you manage relationship, different dimensions of relationships that you find yourself? Friendship with people, business associate. When you master what it takes, when you understand these different dimensions of relationship and you begin to pay attention to them, that is what we are talking about. The knowledge of the world around you. So for you to thrive in any environment, you do need to master these different dimensions of this knowledge that we are talking about. So I say if your knowledge of God does not include the knowledge of the world, the functioning of the world around you, that knowledge of God is incomplete. If your knowledge of God is exclusively to spiritual things, that knowledge is incomplete because you will be deficient in many other areas. In fact, you can be defrauded for not knowing these different dimensions of knowledge that we are talking about. So the knowledge of the world around you, what does it take to thrive in the society where you find yourself? What does it take to actually make it? Can you look for successful people and glean from them and learn from them? This is what I am hoping to achieve. How do I go about it? A successful parent, a successful mother, all the children are well behaved. What can you learn from them? Can you observe them? Can you ask questions from them? Your boss at work, they are very successful. They have reached the pinnacle of their career in very short time. What can you learn from them? How can you relate better with them? Right? So these different dimensions, this different understanding, it is very crucial to your success, to your effectiveness in any environment. So I often tell people, particularly in the Western world, that it is called an information society for a reason. That is because what you know determines how well you live, basically speaking. What you know in any given system, what you know about the system, what you know about the working of a system determine how well the system can prosper you. Or if you don't know anything about the system will limit you and you'll be a good person. You'll be working hard, you'll be diligent, yet you'll be severely limited. This is why we're talking about the knowledge of the world around you. For example, you find yourself in a new environment. What are the needs of the people? Maybe unemployment is a big issue. What are the needs of the people there? How can you actually use that to your own advantage? This is one reason why Jesus talked about the children of this world, that they are wiser in their generation than the children of light. If you read the background to that statement, he was talking about a man that essentially used some of his clients to his advantage to secure his future, so to speak. In other words, when you find yourself in a system, you most likely will not go wrong if you begin to find out about the working of that particular environment. Whether it's a new job, it's a new phase of life, a new project, you want to get married. What have you found out about the nature of man, the nature of woman, the nature of human relationships and things like that? If you do not know these things, most likely you will suffer. You will pay for them. It's the same thing about almost every aspect of life. So there was a time I was living in a property, and the person had just come maybe from one of these war-torn countries, and they had come to seek asylum in the UK and things like that. So we got talking, and we just left. And after a while, after about 3 4 weeks of living in the house, we met again and we got talking, and I was telling them about that you needed to do this and all that, and they were like, oh, they didn't have data to actually do what they were supposed to do. And I said, oh, there's Wi-Fi in the house, this is the Wi-Fi, just connect. And the person didn't know that the Wi-Fi was in the house, the Wi-Fi was part of the property. So essentially they were struggling, right? They couldn't afford to pay for Wi-Fi or internet connectivity, and they didn't know that there was Wi-Fi where they were living. So that is how ignorance, lack of knowledge can limit us in different areas of life or different fields that we find ourselves. So it is important that we get accustomed to the workings of our environment, of the culture, of the way of life, of the system, different policies, and how these affect people. This is very crucial. The knowledge of the world that we find ourselves, the system that we find ourselves. And remember the reference point, like I said last month, about David in the Bible. David was said to have knowledge of all things in the earth. It doesn't mean he was a walking encyclopedia as such. It just means that he had a basic knowledge of the workings, of the functioning of different aspects of life, of different aspects, of different system in which he find or which he found himself at the time. The knowledge of the world around us. That is the second dimension of knowledge that we are talking about, broadly speaking. And one of the ways you can acquire this knowledge is by actually being open-minded, asking relevant questions, talking to the right people, as I will talk about when we get to how to acquire knowledge. All right? So that is the second broad dimension of this knowledge that we're talking about. Now I'll go to the third aspect of this knowledge, which is the knowledge of your field. The knowledge of the field in which you find yourself, or if you like, say the knowledge of a particular field of endeavor, of a particular area of calling. Now, the starting point of this is that some do not even know their fields. Some do not even know what they are supposed to be doing in life. So how can they even make the most of it? Right? So when people are doing what we call jack of all trades, how can they be well established? How can they be well grounded? How can they master a particular skill set or know-how? Right? So now, for a start, what do you think of secular knowledge? Maybe the knowledge of medicine, the knowledge of engineering, the knowledge of accounting, the knowledge of agriculture, different fields of human endeavor. Where do you think secular knowledge, as we call them, where do you think secular knowledge come from? Now, while you're thinking about that, I want you to, if you can, read from the Bible, Isaiah chapter number 28, Isaiah 28, 23 to 29. Isaiah 28, 23 to 29. He says, you should give ear and hear his voice, listen and hear speech. He said, does the plowman, right, that is like agriculture now, does the plowman keep plowing all day to sow? Does he keep turning his soil and breaking the clods? Right? And it went on and on like that. He says, for his God instruct him in right judgment. His God teaches him. Then he went on to talk about the blacksmith. He said, what the blacksmith does by breaking the wheat in his castle or crushing it. He says, this also comes from the Lord of hosts. This knowledge also comes from the Lord of hosts, who is wonderful in counsel and excellent in guidance. This knowledge, he says, comes from the Lord of hosts, who is wonderful in counsel and excellent in guidance. In other words, he was saying, who taught the farmers some knowledge and skills, the know-how? Where did they get the knowledge, the ideas that they use? Where did such ideas come from? Where did they get this knowledge? And like I said last month, because it was an agrarian society at the time, you could say the same about physics, about chemistry, about biology, about engineering, about all these fields. where do this knowledge come from? Where, how do we come about them as humans, right? So if it is true of farmers, it is true of all professionals. The know-how, the skills, the inventions that we're talking about, that we are all enjoying today, were inspired by God. That is the simple answer. They were all as inspired by God, not the devil, right? It wasn't just something that people just thought about. These were things that God made available in the earth. And as people provided the right conditions, the right environment for these ideas, they began to gain this understanding. So I say one of the greatest forms of deliverance, right, that many Christians need is to understand that secular knowledge is not satanic. Secular knowledge is not of the devil, right? Doctors are not of the devil. Engineers are not of the devil. Accountants, all of these people. It is when people begin to twist, right, tweak this knowledge, that you can talk about satanic manipulations and things like that. But secular knowledge does not come from maybe evil people and things like that. No. And they are definitely not against godliness to start with. So when we understand this, there is a way that our approach to whatever field of endeavor we are involved in or we desire to be in, we actually make a difference. There is a way we approach such areas differently, right? So that something can be manipulated does not mean it is not of God, right? So if you're saying secular knowledge is of God, it's like saying the human mind is of a, if you're saying secular knowledge is not of God, it's like saying the human mind is of the devil and things like that. So the idea is to educate and develop the mind, broadly speaking, right? The idea about secular knowledge is to educate or develop the mind, broadly speaking. So with that introduction, I now ask again, what do you know about your field of study or your vocation, a particular field that you find yourself? What do you know that can make you outstanding? What do you know that other people do not know? Now, this is important because when you understand that in every field of endeavor, the top is usually scanty. There are not many people at the top in every field. The bottom is almost always crowded, but the top, if you check, the top is almost isolating. Why? Because few people have top skills in every field. Few people have the highest level of qualifications in every field. Now, there was a time I watched a church program and they were praying for different categories of people. And then when it got to the unemployed, the pastor was just asking about the people that were like leaders. They are like, so if you've got like a first degree, how many of you have got a first degree? So many people raise their hand. How many of you have got a master's? Very few people raise their hands. A church with tens of thousands of people. They say, how many of you have got a PhD? And only 2 people raise their hand. In other words, this is not to say that maybe there are no people that are jobless with PhDs and things like that. No. What I'm saying, or what I drew from that, was that the higher a person is educated, and that is not just talking about formal education, the more a person acquires a particular skill set, right, the more difficult, the near impossible it becomes for them to be jobless or irrelevant, right? People that are up there are there because they have things to offer. They are not just there by luck. They are not just there by accident. They've got things to offer that ordinary people, that common people may not be able to offer. This is very, very significant. So it follows that the more you know about a particular field of endeavor, the more you can be distinguished in that field. Proverbs 22:29, do you see a man who excelled in his business? He said the person will stand before kings. The person will rise to the pinnacle of such career. So that is to tell you, regardless of what other things you do outside of your job, or what other things you do in life, or how good a person you may be, if you do not possess a particular skill, at least in a particular field, that when worse come to worse, push come to shove, when you are left alone, when every other thing is taken away from you, what can you offer? What skills have you got? If you are standing alone, what do you have that cannot be taken away from you? That ultimately will make the difference whether you are successful or not. It is not, there are many good people that are frustrated in life. There are many people that are maybe spiritual that are frustrated, because there are many people that are serving God fervently that are also struggling in life, because God will not bless you like a magic, right? God's blessings are not magical. God is not a magician, right? God has principles. So if a person does not have any field of, it doesn't matter the field now. We just, no matter what it is, no matter what it is, you should master a particular field. You should have in-depth knowledge of a particular area of life. Without that, a person may struggle endlessly in life, right? And like somebody said, if you check the Bible very well, God does not promote dullards, right? That if you check very well, all the people that were promoted, even in the Bible, none of them could be said to be dullard. None of them could be said to be a dullard. They were smart people. They were people doing specific things. They were people knowledgeable in different spheres, different fields, different aspects of life. So if, for example, you are an engineer, you are a tailor, you are a fashion designer, you are a decorator, whatever you do, and you look at the people that are at the top in your field, instead of just maybe casting aspersion, instead of making comments criticizing them, study their works. What do they know that you do not know? What are they doing differently that you are not doing differently? Imagine a pastor that bought a suit or got a suit that cost about £6,000 and gave it to his church member to do, and the church member messed it up. Do you think the pastor will patronize the church member again? Of course, no. Even if you give something, a project to your friend, and they handle it shabbily, will you give it to them again? No. So it is not just about sentiment, right? It is about understanding a particular field, actually understanding how mastery can make a difference for a person in life. So that is the knowledge of a particular field, mastering a particular area of life, knowing it well, knowing it to the extent that it is difficult for anybody to actually beat you in that particular field of endeavor. And that makes a whole lot of difference in the long run. So I say the reason why some may never rise in life, no matter how hard they pray, no matter how hard they do many other things, is because they are deficient when it comes to skills, when it comes to the know-how of the particular area, the particular field of endeavor that they belong, right? So, like I said, this is without prejudice to any area of life. It does not matter the field that we are involved with at this point. We are talking broadly speaking, that anything, any area, that's why the Bible says, for example, that whatever your hands find to do, do it well, right? Whatever you are involved with, do it well, know it well, right? Master it to the point that you can actually be outstanding in that field. Ben Kasi said about the time when he separated Siamese twins, conjoined twins, that before they did that, when he led the team that did that, before they did that, he studied in depth about different attempts that had been made to separate such and the complications that resulted. So they were better prepared to actually guard against such when the same complications happen. It's not that when the complication happen, you now start praying, God have mercy on me and things like that. No, you do your assignment very well. God will not do for you what he has equipped you, what he has enabled you, what he has given you the grace, the ability to actually learn, what he has given you the skills, the information. So you may be praying for a particular direction, for example, and maybe the direction or the idea you are struggling with, somebody has already written about it in a book, right? So instead of just, you may pray and pray and pray and you may not have such ideas. Whereas you can pick the book and see the idea and then you go and act on the same. So this is the significance of the knowledge, the mastery of a particular field that we are doing. So this is why we should never settle for less in any field that we find ourselves, right? So that is that about the knowledge of a particular field of endeavor. So 3 broad areas again of knowledge that we're talking about: the knowledge of God, the knowledge of the world, the system in which we find ourselves at any given point in time, and the knowledge of a particular field. It doesn't matter what field now, just mastering that particular area, that particular field that you find yourself, right? So that is that about that. Now, for the remaining minutes that we've got this month, let me talk about how to acquire knowledge. And next month, I will wrap up the discussion on the power of knowledge. I said we'll cover it in 2 months or in 2 sessions, but then we'll be able to cover it in 3 sessions. So what does it take to acquire knowledge? How can you actually acquire this knowledge that we're talking about? Whether it's the knowledge of God, the knowledge of the world around you, and the knowledge of a particular field of endeavor, regardless of the area, regardless of the area that you're talking about, the principles are the same. Now, the first one is a heart for knowledge. What does it take to acquire knowledge? Is a heart for knowledge. The first thing is not going to school. The first thing is not approaching people to ask questions. The first thing is not even buying books or even reading them. No. The first thing it takes to acquire knowledge is to have a heart for knowledge. Now, and this is simple, because if a person does not like knowledge, or if a person does not love knowledge, in simple terms, they love ignorance. They prefer to remain in ignorance. As simple as that. Now, Proverbs in the Bible, Proverbs chapter number 17, Proverbs 17 verse 16 says, "Why is there in the hand of a fool the purchasing price of wisdom, seeing that he has no heart for it?" Why is there in the hand of a fool the purchasing price of wisdom, seeing that he has no heart for it? So there is actually such thing as the purchasing price, the cost of knowledge. Knowledge will cost you, right? But we'll come back to that. But it says he has no heart for it. In other words, what a person has or what they want to do is not as important as the heart with which they want to do it in the first instance. And that is the basis for talking about this heart for knowledge. Now, probably it has happened to you. There are people you share useful, helpful information with, and they disdain such, right? Or there are people that you recommend certain things that you know will be of help to them by virtue of maybe the fact that you have overcome some of the things they are struggling with, and they disregard such, right? There are people you are trying to tell important lessons, you are trying to share important principles with, and they just express a kind of disdain for such. They belittle even your efforts. They make you even feel bad about trying to help them. Such individuals do not have a heart for knowledge. As simple as that. It may be about, like I said, about different areas of life, whether it's knowledge of God, whether it's knowledge about the world, about the system in which they find themselves, or the knowledge of their field of endeavor, right? It is the same for all these areas of life. A heart for knowledge makes a person willing to learn, makes a person open to actually take suggestions, take ideas, before they even begin to filter such, before they begin to make efforts. The person is open to ideas. The person is receptive to ideas, right? For example, maybe a person is in error, spiritually speaking, and you're saying, have you tried to read this, or have you considered this other scripture? They say, oh, no. I know what I'm talking about. Maybe I had a visitation based on my experience, and then they get into deeper error. Or a person is new in a place, and you're trying to tell them, this is how things work around here. And they're like, no, I already make up my mind. I already know what I'm going to do. Or even about parenting. Somebody is a new parent, and somebody is telling them, this and this and this are the nature of children. Again, before you begin to filter the information that you receive, before you begin to even make conscious effort to acquire this knowledge, you are open, you are willing, you are receptive to different ideas, different suggestions. Remember this saying that if you are patient, you can learn from everybody. Even from a foolish person, you can learn how not to be foolish. People that have made mistakes, you can learn from their mistakes. People that maybe recommend things that are not workable to you, you can still learn. But it starts with having a heart for knowledge, having this willingness, this openness to actually learn from people, to learn from experience. It doesn't have to be your own experience, but it starts with having this willingness, this readiness to acquire knowledge. And this willingness again is important because this knowledge that we are talking about is not necessarily structured. It's not necessarily confined to a particular system or a particular institution. This is why we are not just talking about formal knowledge, right? Even formal knowledge, you do need a degree of heart to be able to actually go all the way. But we're not just talking about formal knowledge. We're talking about knowledge about everything, so to speak. So you do need to have a heart for knowledge. You do need to have a willing mind, a receptive mind, a mind that is willing to process information, to accept and process relevant information. So that is the first thing it takes, the first key, the first principle it takes to actually acquire knowledge. This willingness, you will discover, maybe for example, in apprenticeship, a person that is willing to learn, we go faster, we learn faster than somebody that is just aloof, right? It's just the basic principle of life. Even the knowledge of God, a person that is willing, that is asking questions, that is more passionate about the things of God, we go farther than somebody that is just laid back. So it is important that we possess this heart, this desire for knowledge, that we don't want to be ignorant. Another way of saying possessing a heart for knowledge is that we should hate ignorance. Hate ignorance as much as you hate anything that you want to talk about. Hate ignorance. Have this disdain for ignorance, that I want to know. Not just for the knowledge, for the sake of knowledge, or for the sake of bragging about knowledge, as I will talk about shortly, but actually being able to function effectively, being able to function the way the Lord expects you to function in a particular system or a particular setup. Now, let me talk about one more before we wrap up for this month. What does it take to acquire knowledge? Very simple. Humility, right? Being humble. Humility, it takes humility to acquire knowledge. And when we talk about humility or when we talk about pride, this is something that people are very quick to defend themselves. People are quite defensive and sometimes dismissive when it comes to any discussion about humility or pride. I am not proud. That person is proud. I am humble and things like that, right? But when we talk about humility, we are not just talking about some kind of emblem or label that we wear now. We're talking about this simplicity to understand, to accept that you do not know some things, and to seek or ask the people that do know, to look for answers, to look for solutions where we may be ignorant or where our knowledge may be insufficient or where our knowledge may be deficient. This willingness to actually admit that I don't know some things about this aspect of life. I don't know some things about this particular area of life, or in this my field of endeavor. Even though this person is younger, they are ahead of me. So I will humble myself. I will go to them to teach me this skill that I do not know, right? So this is why we talk about role models, about mentors and things like that. It takes humility to submit to people. It takes humility to know that some people are ahead of you and it is just wisdom to learn from them, right? Like one of the inventors said that if I had seen any father, it's because I'm standing on the shoulders of those who have gone ahead of me. In simple times, there is nothing new under the sun. There is absolutely nothing new under the sun. There's nothing that you're trying to do that has not been done before, basically. There is no new thing that is completely, right, irrelevant, or that is completely new, in the sense that it is not completely different from the old things. There is no new thing that is completely different from the old things, in the sense that all new things are essentially old things improved upon. All new things are essentially old things built or improved upon. If you think about computers, for example, before computers, there were typewriters, right? As simple as that. As simple as that. Before mobile phones, there were landlines, right? Before aeroplanes, people were traveling to different parts of the world. It just took them longer. Before emails, you had letters that people write manually and send, and it may take weeks or whatever. So every new thing is actually just an improvement on the old, right? It may be new ways of doing something, in the sense that, oh, you say, oh, this is actually new. But if you think about it, one way or the other, people had been surviving. People have been finding a way around that particular thing before. So it is wisdom to actually acknowledge existing knowledge. Whether this is limiting or not, it is wisdom to acknowledge existing knowledge. It is wisdom to acknowledge people that are ahead of you. And that is a function of humility. That is a function of understanding that you do not know it all and bringing yourself low. Now, this humility is also important because it guards against being puffed up, right? Being puffed up, not looking down on others. Why is that significant? Ideas can come from anybody, right? There was a story about some engineers that were struggling to build elevators, and the janitor just came around and said, oh, if I were you, I would build this elevator outside. And at the time, an elevator had never been constructed outside. The idea came from a janitor, a cleaner, if you like, an ordinary person. Now imagine if the person had been disregarded, if their wisdom had been discarded, right? So wisdom, ideas can come from anybody. Humility will make you to actually humble yourself to learn. There are super successful, super rich people that have been saved by their drivers, by their cleaners, by their cooks. They just listened to them. They just took their advice, right? But pride will not make a person to take heed to such counsel, right? So this is why I say when we talk about humility and pride, we should not be quick to be dismissive or say, oh no, I'm not proud, I'm a humble person, and things like that. There are different manifestations of this humility and pride, but I'm just talking about this with regards to knowledge, right? That great ideas sometimes come from inconsequential, quote and unquote, inconsequential people, right? Great ideas can come from ordinary sources. Humility will make you to acknowledge this and approach people accordingly. Humility will keep you from having this exaggerated view about yourself, as if everything rises and falls on your shoulder, or as if you are the best thing that ever happened to the world. No, you are special, of course, but of course, the other person is also special in the sight of God. And if you respect people like that, if you begin to treat people on that basis, you'll be amazed at what you will learn from them. This is before we even talk about certain barriers like age, about gender, about race, and things like that when it comes to humility. But we will continue from there next month. Now, this is a convenient point for us to draw the curtain in the month of March. What have we talked about? We have continued the discussion on the power of knowledge. We're talking about part 2 of it, and I've shared with us that when we talk about this knowledge, it encompasses the knowledge of God, which we started last month. And this month, I've talked about the knowledge of the world, the system, how to prosper in any system, any environment in which we find ourselves. And of course, the knowledge of a particular field of endeavor in which we find ourselves. When we understand this, it will make a tremendous difference for us in life. Now, if you do have questions about what we've talked about, please do send me an email, including getting your walk with God right, and I'll be happy to actually answer those questions and be a helper of your joy and your success story in life. And of course, our next meeting, like I said, we'll actually conclude the session on the power of knowledge part 3. The power of knowledge part 3, it will take place in April the third Friday in April the 21st. I'll be talking about the power of knowledge part 3. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do share it with your loved ones, share it with anybody that you feel will be a blessing to, and of course do like it and let as many people that we need it, that as many people that will be blessed by it, be actually informed, be notified of this. Thank you so much. God bless you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.